Right everyone, it is Finn here and welcome to my Premier League Match Week 29 predictions where, ladies and gentlemen, this is the biggest match week of the season. I know I say that in literally every single video, but with Manchester City versus Liverpool and Newcastle United versus Manchester United, you can't really argue with it. And of course, as we've got such gigantic games along with so many others, let's jump straight into things with Man City versus Liverpool. And I mean, it's not the worst way to start off a Premier League match week, literally two of the biggest clubs in the Premier League. And of course, look at things, the big question is, or the big problem is, Manchester City are without Erling Haaland due to injury.
Yes! Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby!
I've heard a lot of people say that Liverpool should run over Man City as Man City don't have a striker at the moment, but I do think they are forgetting the fact that they do have a World Cup winning striker after Erling Haaland, which isn't necessarily a bad asset to have. I do think Man City will hold their own, but I don't think it'll be easy versus Liverpool. Obviously, look at the last 4 meetings between these two teams. Liverpool have gone unbeaten versus Man City, and it could be a real problem here. And although Liverpool haven't had a brilliant season, they've done very, very well in the big games. Unfortunately, I can say that as a Manchester United fan. And of course, although Man City have had a far better season than Liverpool, I actually think Liverpool are going to take this one 2-1. I think they've done absolutely brilliantly in the big games, and there's just something about a player like Mo Salah who will make the difference in my opinion. Now, jumping into game number 2, we do have Arsenal versus Leeds, which I still cannot believe the comeback Arsenal have had this season. Considering for the last 10 to 20 years, they've almost been an outside of top 4 kind of team, the comeback they've had is better than Rob Holding's hairline. I do think versus Leeds United, they should have no problems, although Leeds United have had a tiny bit of a comeback themselves. Once again, Arsenal just by far are the better team from attack to defense. They've proven to everyone this season that they could be a Premier League winning team, and games like this make the difference. Now, before we jump into our next game being Bournemouth versus Fulham, let me not forget to remind you guys that we are nearing the end of the Premier League season. Of course, I've done these predictions throughout the season, and if you guys have enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe down below if you are not already. It does show me that you do enjoy this series and that I should continue it in the future, along with leaving a like down below. Can we get 1 like for every Premier League team with 20 likes? Thank you very much. But of course, jumping into game number 3, it is Bournemouth versus Fulham. Now, of course, it's not going to be an easy game to predict because looking at Bournemouth, no team has lost more games after the World Cup than Bournemouth in the Premier League. But saying that, looking at Fulham, they're without their manager Silva, Willian and Mitrovic in this team due to red cards in the FA Cup.
Naughty, naughty.
I mean, I'm sure Fulham always wanted to get a hat-trick in big games, but I never thought they would want a hat-trick of red cards. And of course, missing some absolutely gigantic players in their game, I'm actually going to give this one to O'Neill and this Bournemouth team. Once again, although they've been in poor form, missing some big players, I just don't know whether I can give it to Fulham. Now, heading into our next game, once again, another gigantic game with Brighton versus Brentford. Once again, the fact that they are 7th and 8th place in the Premier League, literally on the same points, I never thought I'd see that in my life, fighting for a European spot in the Premier League.
Look at us. Hey, look at us. Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
As I said, obviously being on the same points, it's not going to be easy to predict here. And looking at the history between these two teams, 2 wins apiece and a draw, literally these two teams are so alike at the moment. I think the only thing that kind of differentiates them is the fact that Brighton are missing some major players through injury. And because of that, I'm going to give this one to Brentford. Once again, initially I had written down in my notes that this could be a 2-2 draw. But due to injuries, I do think I'm going to give it to the Bees. And I think they're going to pack a powerful sting with a 2-1 win. Now, heading into our next game, we have Crystal Palace versus Leicester. And looking at Crystal Palace, of course, the almighty legend Roy Hodgson is back at 75 years old, now the oldest manager in Premier League history, surpassing the likes of, well, Roy Hodgson from 2 years ago. Once again, the fact that that man is going to manage again at such a top level at his age, once again, it's going to be interesting to see. But whether he can save the Eagles versus Leicester City, it's going to be hard to say. Obviously, Leicester City have had an awful season, and they both are fighting in the relegation zone at the moment. For some reason, I do think Leicester City will take this one though, although once again, Crystal Palace, it's very hard to predict what they'll do under Roy Hodgson, but I do think he will take a game or two to get back to develop, and I do think Leicester City will take this one. Obviously, missing the likes of Tielemans through injury, though, is a major loss. But I do think someone like James Maddison could get a goal or two, maybe even a free kick. Now, heading into our next game, we have the likes of Nottingham Forest versus Wolves, which obviously the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White versus his former team. And this is always going to be an interesting game to watch. I do think, though, that there is an obvious favourite here, with Wolves winning 4 of the last 5 games between the two. But saying that, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be easy. If there's one thing Wolves have done to struggle to do over the last year or two, it is score goals. And versus one of the most successful goalkeepers of all time, it's not going to be easy. Although I have to give Lopetegui and this whole Wolves team a lot of credit for their comeback this season, I actually think that this will go down as a draw, and I'm going to put it 0-0. Although Nottingham Forest are struggling with a lot of injuries, I just think it will be incredibly close. Now, jumping into our next game, it is Chelsea versus Villa, which I never thought I'd say this after the last 2 years, but this could be a close game, considering 2 years ago Chelsea won the Premier League and Aston Villa was celebrating, well, not getting relegated.
Celebrations slightly over the top. But
the fact that these two teams are very close at the moment is very worrying for Chelsea. Obviously, the fact that Thiago Silva's also picked up an injury obviously really doesn't help their case. The likes of Reece James has picked up an injury. I'm worried for Chelsea in terms of their defense, especially considering Aston Villa have been in good form at the moment in the Premier League. Maybe the international break would have unsettled their form a tiny bit. But although maybe, yes, this does sound like a tiny bit of a shock, I think Aston Villa could take this one. And I think the likes of Aston Villa could have a very good evening.
Good evening.
I'm going to give Aston Villa a 1-0 win, as I think Ollie Watkins will make the difference. Now, jumping into one of our last games, we have West Ham United versus Southampton, which, look here at Southampton, they've gotten major points as of late in the Premier League. A draw versus Manchester United and a 3-3 draw versus Tottenham Hotspurs. They've done relatively well versus the top teams, despite the fact that they are dead last in the Premier League. Look here, West Ham United, once again, they're also a decent team, but also in the relegation zone as well, and this is huge for a relegation zone battle. And you know what? I'd hate to say it to David Moyes, because I really do like him and this Hammers team, but I actually think Southampton could come away with the shock result here, and I'm going to put it 1-0. Although, once again, West Ham United could easily win it 2 or 3-0. I think it's one of those games where it totally depends on form, and absolutely anything can happen. Now, jumping into our next game, absolutely gigantic, with Newcastle United versus Manchester United. Now, I would be lying if I didn't say I'm a tiny bit worried, as Marcus Rashford is out with injury, but there is a possibility that he could return. But of course, Casemiro picking up a red card suspension doesn't fill me with a lot of promise, and I am worried about that.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
But once again, we saw versus Newcastle United in the Carabao Cup final. We are the better team and we should pick up a win here. Although they've obviously got a different goalkeeper, no one's going to carry us to a win here. They do have Nick Pope back. It could be close, but I'm still going to back the Red Devils. Now, jumping into our next set of games, we do have Everton versus Tottenham Hotspurs, which it is the most Tottenham Hotspurs thing of all time to get the likes of Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte to look like bad managers.
This is football heritage.
Well, in fact, maybe the most Tottenham Hotspurs thing ever would be to be in top 4 and lose to Everton. But this time around, I do think Tottenham will pick up a win, and I'm going to put a 3-0 win. I mean, to be honest, Tottenham Hotspurs almost did better when they had that assistant manager take over instead of Antonio Conte. On top of that, they've got some absolutely brilliant players. They've got no excuse but to lose here, although you could say that every time Tottenham Hotspurs bottle something. But versus an Everton team, although I do like Sean Dyche, I do think Spurs should be the obvious favourites. Now, we're just going to run through our next set of games relatively quickly, as they are going to be repeat games, and let's be honest, we've spoken enough about all the teams already. But we started with Bournemouth versus Brighton, both playing their second game of the match week. As you can see, I've put down a 3-1 win in Brighton's favour because, as I said, they are fighting for a European spot, and Bournemouth haven't been that good. Brighton just clearly are the favourites team here. Heading into our next game, we have the likes of Leeds United versus Nottingham, which I did put this prediction down relatively long ago, whether I actually think Nottingham Forest could win this time. I actually think I'm going to stick to my original prediction with Leeds United. I think under Grazia, brand new manager, I feel like there's potential for them to really achieve something, and it could be exciting. And as I said, Forest are really struggling with injuries at the moment. Now, next up, we've got the likes of Leicester City versus Aston Villa. And originally, I predicted Aston Villa, and I'm going to keep it that way. I just think they've had a better season overall, and they're actually fighting for a top 10 spot. Sorry, Leicester City. We've also got the likes of Chelsea versus Liverpool, Man United versus Brentford. What's happened to this Premier League season? The amount of top quality games are absolutely absurd.
The best league in the world.
As you can see, I've predicted West Ham Newcastle with a with the draw there, although I do think Newcastle United, with what they've proven this season, I'm going to change that to a 2-1 win. But looking at our last two games, starting off with Chelsea versus Liverpool, once again, Chelsea have had an awful season, although last time they played Liverpool, they had some promising moments. I just think Liverpool have had a much better season. It's going to be very, very close, and I do think they'll take a 1-0 win, which of course takes us to our final game, being Man United versus Brentford, and it just gives me PTSD from the beginning of the season. But once again, we've got enough quality in this Red Devils team, and they should have no problem but to take it 2-0. Although once again, I feel like when it comes to set pieces, Brentford could definitely catch Manchester United off guard. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for my Premier League Match Week 29 predictions. Of course, there's about 15 games that need to be played after the international break. And there, once again, it's not easy to predict games so far in advance, especially if they're playing between that second game. But of course, guys, I hope that you did enjoy this video. Of course, if you did, don't forget to subscribe down below. Don't forget to leave a like. And of course, don't forget to leave your predictions down below. It's only fair that if I leave mine on the internet, you do too. But of course, guys, jokes aside, I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Cheers. Bye.